At my father's retirement gala, I watched him raise his glass. Robert Miller, bathed in the spotlight, wearing that smug smile he always wore when the world was admiring him. He announced that my brother, Christopher, would inherit everything. The $250 million company, the media empire, the entire family legacy. Then, he turned his eyes toward me. The smile tightened. And to my daughter, Elsa, he said, his voice dropping. The one with the soft heart. I'll be leaving her a trust fund of $50,000 a year. Just enough to keep her busy with her little hobbies. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. That speech, that humiliation, wasn't the start of the night. It was the end. 30 minutes earlier, I was standing in the Miller Legacy wing of the Modern Art Museum. The room was glittering. Crystal chandeliers hung low, casting a warm light on the city's most powerful people. Champagneflutes clinked. A string quartet played something soft and expensive. It was a room built to celebrate my father's power. And I felt completely, utterly cold. My father, Robert Miller, was on stage, accepting the Philanthropist of the Year award. The irony was so thick, I could barely breathe. He was smiling, holding the glass trophy, and talking about the Miller Foundation's latest project, the new downtown community center. We believe in giving back, he said, his voice echoing with false humility. We believe that true success is about lifting up the community. I almost laughed. I looked down at the program. There was his picture, right next to a rendering of the building. My building. That was my project. I was the one who spent 18 months building it. I was the one who sat through the late-night city council zoning meetings. I was the one who negotiated with contractors, who met with the community leaders, who listened to the stories of the families we were trying to help. I knew the names of the kids who would use the after-school program. I knew the single mothers who needed the job training center. My father, he had never even visited the site. Not once. I watched him accept the applause. And that old, familiar ache settled in my chest. The pain of being invisible. This was his pattern. My passion. My work. My compassion. These were just resources for him to mine. They were hobbies he could repackage, put his name on, and use to build his own legacy. No. Father, you don't believe in giving back. You believe in taking credit. My brother, Christopher, slid up beside me. A perfectly tailored suit and a blindingly white smile. He was the heir. The golden child. A perfect mirror of our father's ambition. He nudged me, his voice a low, mocking whisper. Try to look less bored. Elle, you're ruining the photo op. I didn't answer. I just watched as he glided away, shaking hands, accepting congratulations for work he'd never done. He was born for this. He knew how to look important, how to laugh at the right jokes, how to exist in this world of glittering surfaces. I looked for my mother, Karen. She was standing near the stage, her smile as perfect and fixed as the pearls at her throat. She looked like a queen, playing her part. Our eyes met across the room. I saw a flicker of something, acknowledgement guilt. But just as quickly as it came, it was gone. She turned away. She looked down at her glass, smoothing the silk of her gown. As always, that was her role. The silent peacekeeper, the one who enabled the cruelty by pretending not to see it. I knew what was coming next. My father's speech wasn't just about the award. It was his retirement announcement. And I knew, just as everyone in this room knew, what that meant. This was Christopher's coronation. And I was just the shadow he cast. I was the scapegoat. The soft heart in a family that valued only power. And I was about to be put back in my place. My father, Robert Miller, stepped back to the microphone, his smile radiating satisfaction. He raised his glass. The room fell instantly silent. To build a legacy, he began, his voice booming with authority. You need more than vision. You need strength. You need a successor who isn't afraid of the hard decisions. He turned his gaze to my brother, and his smile widened, filled with a genuine pride he never, ever showed me. Christopher has proven he has that strength. He sees the world for what it is. Son, I am proud to announce that, upon my retirement, the company is yours. The room erupted in applause. It was a coronation. Christopher stood up, bowing his head slightly, accepting the praise as his birthright. My father held up a hand, silencing the room again. But the smile remained. Then, that smile tightened. His eyes found me, sitting at the family table. The warmth vanished. Of course, he said, his tone shifting. A family also needs balance. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting every eye in the room follow his gaze to me. My daughter, Elsa. He said my name like it was an afterthought. Her compassion. It's admirable. For the little things. My stomach clenched. I knew this tone. This was the tone he used before the kill. So, to ensure she's never burdened by the complexities of the business, I have established a trust fund in her name. $50,000 a year. Just enough, he added, with a light chuckle, to keep her busy with whatever hobbies she finds. $50,000. The words hung in the air. It wasn't a gift. It was a public execution. It was a cage. He had just, in front of 200 of the city's most powerful people, dismissed my entire life, my work, my passion, my degree, as a hobby. He had put a price tag on my worth, and it was a rounding error in his empire. I heard polite, uncomfortable titters ripple through the crowd. I saw my brother Christopher smirk into his champagne glass, reveling in my humiliation. And in that moment, as the heat rose in my face, everything became crystal clear. I finally understood. This wasn't just favoritism. This was a system. This was the classic, narcissistic family system. My father, Robert, the narcissist at the center, demanding constant admiration. My brother, Christopher, the golden child, the one who reflects all of the father's ambition and glory, the one who can do no wrong. And me, I realized, as the humiliation burned in my chest, I was the scapegoat. I was the one who carried everything he hated. His weakness, his softness, anything that didn't fit his ruthless image. He projected onto me. I wasn't just the invisible daughter. I was the family's emotional dumpster. The $50,000 trust wasn't a safety net. It was a label. It was his way of telling the world, she is broken. She is incapable. She needs me to survive. It was a lie. The humiliation was so sharp, so complete, that it didn't break me. It did the opposite. It burned away the last bit of fog. The last desperate hope that one day he would finally see me. He saw me. He had always seen me. He just didn't like what he saw. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the marble floor was loud. Too loud. The laughter and whispers died instantly. Every head turned. My father paused, his smile faltering, annoyed by the interruption. My mother looked up, her eyes wide with panic, silently begging me, Don't make a scene. I looked at her. I looked at my father on the stage. I didn't say a word. I just turned, and I started walking toward the exit. I wasn't running away. I wasn't fleeing. I was just leaving. I was done being the audience for my own execution. I needed to breathe. I was almost at the exit, just pushing past the heavy velvet curtains that led to the main lobby, when a voice cut through the silence. Elsa, wait. I turned. It was my Aunt Susan, my father's sister. Susan was the family lawyer, the one who always looked tired, the one who navigated our family's dysfunctions with a weary, professional distance. She was holding a large, thick manila envelope. He shouldn't have done that, she said, her voice low. That was cruel. Even for him. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I wanted to be out of the building. Listen, she said, stepping closer and lowering her voice even more. I was given instructions years ago from your grandmother. My grandmother, Eleanor, the founder, The woman whose name was on the wing of the museum we were standing in. She had died when I was in college. Eleanor was very specific. Susan continued, her eyes glancing back at the ballroom. I was to give this to you. And only you. On the night your father officially announced his retirement. After he spoke. Not before. She held out the envelope. It was heavy. My name, Elsa Miller, was written across the front in my grandmother's elegant, sharp handwriting. She called it a failsafe. Susan whispered. She said, if Robert becomes the man I fear he is, this will be necessary. Elsa. He's become that man. My hands were shaking. I looked at the envelope. I looked back at the ballroom, where the applause had died, and my father and brother were already accepting congratulations. Moving on. As if my public execution had just been a minor item on the agenda. I felt that familiar shame. The urge to take the envelope, slip into the night, and read it in private. To hide. But the humiliation from moments ago. It was still burning. It had burned away my fear. No, I said. And my voice surprised me. It was cold. Not in private. Not tonight. I turned away from the exit. I walked back into the ballroom. The whispers started as soon as I was spotted. People parted to let me through. Their faces a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. I walked straight past the guests. Past my brother's smug face. Past my mother's terrified one. I walked right back to the family table. Right in the center of the room. I ignored my father, who was watching me with a look of pure, thunderous rage. How dare you interrupt my night? I sat down. I placed the thick envelope on the table. And in the sudden, heavy silence of the room, I slid my finger under the clasp and tore it open. The sound was like a gunshot. Inside wasn't just a letter. It was a stack of documents. Thick. Bound by a blue legal ribbon. And on top, a handwritten letter on her personal stationery. My hands were trembling. But my voice. When I started to read, it was clear. I started quietly. Just for myself. My dearest Elsa. Then I looked up. I looked at my father. And I started again. My voice rising. Projecting across the room. My dearest Elsa. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. And my greatest fears have been realized. I built Miller Industries on a simple principle, that integrity was our greatest asset. I fear your father has forgotten that. What is this? My father hissed from the stage. Elsa. Sit down. This is not the time. I ignored him. I kept reading. Your father sees compassion as a weakness. I have always seen it as your strength. It is the only thing that can balance the ruthless ambition he inherited. He sees your brother as a mirror. But he sees you as a threat. He was always wrong. Elsa! My father shouted. Security. Keep reading. Aunt Susan said, appearing beside me. It's your right. I held the letter high. I have watched you. Elsa. I watched you build your first community garden. I watched you give your time to things that didn't offer a profit, but offered a purpose. You are my true heir. Not him. Not Christopher. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. This, I said, my voice shaking with the power of it, is a letter from Eleanor Miller. And these. I held up the bound documents. These are the legal, binding papers. She didn't leave her controlling interest to my father. She left it to me, to be transferred from a trust to my full control. On the day he officially retired, my father's face went white. Utterly, deathly white. She left the company to me, I said, meeting his horrified gaze, to save its soul. From you. The room didn't just get quiet. It died. The only sound was the sharp, loud smash of a champagne flute hitting the marble floor. My father, Robert, had dropped his glass. Champagne and shards of crystal sprayed across the stage. He was staring at the documents in my hand. His face not just white, but a waxy, sickly gray. His mask of power was gone. For the first time in my life, I saw what he really was. A small, terrified man. It was Christopher who broke the spell. Fraud, he screamed. His voice cracked. High and ugly. He lunged forward from his table, jabbing a finger at me. That's a fake. She faked it, Dad. Tell them. It's a disgusting trick. My father tried to speak. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, gasping sound came out. He gripped the podium, his knuckles white. That's a letter, he finally stammered, his voice thin. He was trying to rebuild his authority. But it was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Just a letter. From a senile old woman. It has no legal standing. The official will was updated years ago. Susan. Tell them. He pointed at my aunt. The lawyer. Tell them it means nothing. All eyes swiveled to Aunt Susan. She looked pained. She stepped forward, holding the documents I had given her. Robert. The letter is accompanied by a notarized directive. She began, but her voice was hesitant. But he is right. The final family trust. The one I have on file. It was updated. It does name Christopher. My heart stopped. No. After all this. Was it just a wish? A final, cruel joke? My father saw the opening, and a flicker of his old self returned. He let out a shaky, relieved laugh. You see, a sentimental wish? Nothing more. Elsa, you've made a terrible, terrible scene. No. The word was quiet, but it cut through the room like a diamond. It wasn't my voice. My mother, Karen Miller, stood up. She hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken. She had been a statue of silent support at my father's side for 30 years. But now, she was standing. She didn't look at my father. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at me. Her face was calm. The perfect, polite mask, gone. Replaced by something I had never seen. Resolution. No. Robert, she said again. Her voice clear and carrying across the room. She walked. Not to my father, but to me and Susan. Eleanor was many things, my mother said, speaking to the room. But she was never senile, and she knew her son. My father's face twisted. Karen. What are you doing? Sit down. My mother ignored him. She reached into her small, elegant evening bag, the one that always looked like it held nothing but lipstick. She pulled out an envelope, identical to the one I had just opened. Old, thick, sealed with wax. Eleanor knew you would try to change it. Robert, she said, her voice shaking just a little. But not with fear. With rage. She knew you would bully the lawyers. That you would never let the company go to anyone but your own reflection. She held the envelope up. She gave me this. A notarized, binding copy of her final will and testament. 20 years ago. Just after Christopher was born. She made me hide it. She said, Karen, keep this. And God help us. I hope you never have to use it. But if Robert ever forgets who he is, if he ever tries to steal the soul of what I built, you'll know what to do. She didn't give it to Susan. She gave it to me. She said to give it to the rightful heir. My mother whispered, her eyes filling with tears for the first time. That's you. Elsa. It was always you. I looked at my father. He wasn't breathing. He was staring at my mother. At the second envelope. His face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The betrayal, the checkmate, was not from his mother. It was from his wife. The silent one. He made a sound. A low, strangled noise in the back of his throat. He staggered back, clutching his chest, and collapsed into his chair on the stage. His reign was over. His self-destruction was complete. And it was his own wife who had delivered the final, killing blow. I looked at my father. He was just a man. A broken, defeated man staring at the floor. His empire crumbled around him. Then I looked at my brother. Christopher. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at our mother. Karen. His eyes filled with a venomous, stunned betrayal. They had built their world on her silence. And in one moment, her voice had leveled it to the ground. The room was waiting. The guests, the investors, the partners, they were all looking at me, waiting to see what I would do next. The weak daughter, the scapegoat, the little hobby girl. I didn't feel weak. I felt clear. I walked past my father, past my brother, and stepped up onto the small stage. My heels clicked on the wood. I picked up the microphone my father had used to humiliate me. The feedback gave a soft shriek before I adjusted it. Tonight, I started, and my voice was steady. It didn't tremble. It echoed across the silent, glittering room. Tonight, my family has spoken a great deal about legacy, about what one generation passes down to the next. I looked at my father. For years, I was told that legacy was about strength, about power, about ruthless decisions. I turned my gaze to the guests. But my grandmother, Eleanor Miller, the woman who founded this company, believed in something different. I just read her words. And she reminded me that this company was never meant to be a prize. It was meant to be a responsibility. I could feel my father's eyes on me. But I didn't look back at him. I looked at Christopher. My grandmother left me this company, with one mission to restore its soul. And that restoration, that legacy of integrity, it has to start with action, not just words. I took a deep breath. This was it. The cord wasn't just being cut, it was being severed. Therefore, as the new head of Miller Industries, my first official act is this. Christopher Miller is immediately removed as Chief Operating Officer. Robert Miller is suspended from the Board of Directors, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the room. My Aunt Susan, the lawyer, just nodded slowly, as if she knew this was the only way. We will be conducting a full, independent audit of the values this company has prioritized for the last 20 years. Miller Industries was founded on the belief that compassion and business could coexist. Tonight, that belief is back. I placed the microphone back on its stand. The silence was absolute. It was so total. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. My mother, Karen, was the only one I could see clearly. Her hands clasped in front of her, tears streaming down her face. Then, from the back of the room, one person started clapping. A slow, deliberate clap. Then, another, and another. It wasn't the thunderous applause my father had received. It was something different. It was the sound of respect. It was the sound of justice. Finally served. I haven't spoken to my father or my brothers since that night. The company audit is revealing. It's a long road. My mother and I, we're starting over. It's quiet. It's new. But for the first time in my life, I know I'm on the right path. Sometimes you have to cut the toxic cord. Not just for yourself, but to save the legacy that truly matters. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between your family and your values? Share your story down in the comments. And please don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more.
They didn't ask. They just decided. And like always, I was expected to nod, smile, and make it all work. My name is Rachel Connors. I'm 28 years old, a senior accountant at a firm. No one outside of finance has heard of, and I live a quiet life in a quiet building with no drama and no damage. I've built everything I have from the ground up: my degree, my job, my credit score, even my kitchen table. No handouts, no shortcuts. But if you ask my family, they'd probably say, I'm the cold one. Not because I've ever yelled or walked out or done anything cruel, just because I stopped cleaning up their messes. You see, I have an older sister, Erin, 2 years ahead of me, but somehow always 5 steps behind. Erin has a way of making failure look like tragedy and making everyone else responsible for it. Lost another job. The boss was toxic. Kicked out of another apartment. Roommates were jealous. Another missed bill. She's trying her best. And my parents, Carol and Frank, they never question it. They just pivot, rearrange, and if they can't fix it directly, they turn to me. You're stable, Rachel. You're lucky you can help. That was the phrase that followed me for years. Help with the car payment, help with rent, help with bail, always help. And when I said no, the rare times I pushed back, they'd act like I was the one burning bridges. I learned early on, my value wasn't in being loved, it was in being useful. But usefulness has limits, and they were about to find mine. Sunday dinner had a rhythm in our house. Same casserole, same table, same undercurrent of pressure disguised as politeness. That evening, something felt rehearsed. Mom greeted me at the door with a smile too wide to be sincere. "You look so thin, sweetheart. Are you eating enough?" Dad didn't say much, just a nod and a distracted, "Hey, kiddo." Erin was already at the table, scrolling her phone, avoiding my eyes like a teenager called into the principal's office. I knew the signs. When my mother acted sweet and my father went silent, it meant they were about to tell me something they knew I wouldn't like. We made it through the salad. Mom complimented the weather like it was an achievement. Dad kept refilling his glass, and Erin kept picking at her food like it might bite back. Then Mom set down her fork, folded her hands on the table, and gave me that practiced smile she saved for requests wrapped in guilt. "Rachel," she began too softly. "We've been talking. Erin's had a rough time lately, and, well, she's going to be moving in with you for a little while. Just like that. No question, no discussion." She said it like she was offering me cookies. Like, of course I'd say yes. I felt the room pause like they were waiting for me to resist, waiting for the pushback they could call selfish. I looked at Erin. She glanced up quickly, then away. My dad cleared his throat, already bracing for the argument. Instead, I smiled. "Of course," I said lightly. "If it helps Erin get back on her feet, I don't see why not." The silence that followed was sharp. My mother blinked, caught off guard. My dad exhaled like he'd dodged a bullet. Erin leaned back in her chair, smug, creeping across her face like moss. None of them noticed how still I went after that. How quiet they thought I'd caved. But what they didn't know, what none of them had thought to ask, was that I hadn't lived in that apartment in weeks. And I had no intention of letting Erin or any of them move into a place that no longer existed. I didn't wake up one day and decide to lie to my family. It took years of quiet disappointments, of guilt-wrapped favors and memory-hold sacrifices, of realizing that in my family, survival came with strings and being the strong one just meant being the most convenient to use. When I was 21, Erin's car got repossessed. She called sobbing. Said she couldn't get to her new job. Said this one was different. She just needed a little help getting started. My credit was clean. Co-signing felt like a small thing. She stopped showing up to that job 3 weeks later, missed the payments. Guess whose credit took the hit? At 23, Mom called me crying because the mortgage was past due. Dad had been laid off. Erin had moved back in. I wired $2,000 the next morning. No one thanked me. At Christmas, Mom handed me a mug that said "World's Best Daughter," and I almost laughed. At 25, Erin got a DUI, first one we knew about at least. Dad asked me to keep it quiet, said it would destroy the family's reputation. I paid for the lawyer. Erin never said a word. A year later, when she got pulled over again and I refused to help, Mom called me cold. "You've never understood what it means to worry for someone you love," she said. "Erin's life is harder than yours." That was the moment I knew, not suspected knew. They didn't see me. They saw a function, a faucet they could turn on when something broke. A wallet that smiled. I started pulling back, politely declining. Changing topics, saying, "I'll think about it" instead of yes, they noticed. And they didn't like it. One night, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment, the condo I'd bought without help, decorated on clearance sales paid for month by month with numbers and spreadsheets and quiet diligence. I stared at the front door and realized I didn't feel safe in it anymore. Because it wasn't mine when they wanted something. It was always ours. Just like my time, my money, my patience. So I made a decision. I called a realtor, sold the unit, quietly, legally. Without fanfare, I moved into a small rental on the other side of town. No one asked where, and I didn't offer it. I could have told them, but I didn't. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, out of preservation. Because sometimes when you grow up in a family that only remembers your usefulness, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is disappear, just enough to breathe. The texts started on Monday. "We'll bring Erin's mattress Saturday morning. Frank's loading the boxes Friday night. She's excited to finally have her own space." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They were speaking to a version of me that no longer existed. Each message assumed I would open the door, rearrange my life, absorb the weight without making a sound. They'd done it before. They just didn't know I had stopped listening. By Thursday, Mom was texting me daily. Let me know if you need anything cleaned before she moves in. Erin says she won't be a burden. She's bringing her own dishes. That one made me laugh quietly to myself over coffee. She hadn't washed a dish in her own apartment in years, but I let it all play out. I didn't push back. I didn't correct them. I waited Saturday morning. I left early. Coffee first, then a drive across town to nowhere in particular. I walked through a farmer's market I didn't plan to buy anything from. Stood in the sun longer than necessary. My phone vibrated in my pocket 3 times before I looked. Missed calls. Voicemails. I let the 4th call go through Rachel. It was Mom, but not her soft voice. The brittle one, the one layered with panic. "What's going on?" she demanded. "There's someone here. Some man. He says he lives in the condo. Says you don't live here anymore." I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it, the unfamiliar space, the missing certainty. "You didn't tell us," she snapped. "You never said a word." "No," I replied evenly. "I didn't." There was scrambling in the background, the rustle of bags. Dad's voice, sharp and low. Erin saying something I couldn't hear? "Rachel." Mom hissed. "What is this?" "I sold the condo," I said simply. "Weeks ago." "You what?" "I moved out." Quietly. I didn't think it mattered. No one asked where I lived, so I didn't say. For a moment, nothing. I imagined them standing on that porch, bags on the ground, arms crossed, realizing they'd planned an invasion and showed up at the wrong castle. Then Dad's voice cutting through. "You lied to us. You said she could move in," I said. "If it helps Erin, I don't see why not." I didn't say where. Another pause, a sharp inhale from Mom. And from Erin, finally. "So what? We're just... what?" Supposed to figure it out now. She sounded young when she said it. Not angry, just lost. And for the briefest second, I almost answered. But I didn't. Because here's what they didn't know. I hadn't changed the locks out of anger. I hadn't sold the condo to make a point. I did it because I was tired of living in a space that never felt mine. I did it because I deserved to walk into my own home and not brace for impact. And because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people who refuse to change is to stop making space for them. They thought that was the end of it. They were wrong. Because by evening they were standing at my door. I knew they'd come. Even as I sipped my coffee that morning, even as I let their voicemails pile up, I knew Mom wouldn't let it go. She'd dig or call someone or show up just to prove a point that no matter how far I moved, I was still reachable, still obligated. By sunset, the knock came. 3 quick-clipped hits. The kind you hear when someone's trying to stay polite but is barely holding it together. I looked through the peephole. Carol, Frank, Erin, and a trunk full of boxes parked on the curb like it was moving day. I opened the door halfway. "You found me," I said, flatly. Mom looked flushed, her lipstick faded and hair pushed back like she'd run her hands through it too many times. "We tried calling," she said, voice tight. We didn't think you'd be here." "It's my apartment," I said, but you said Dad's voice was rising now. "You said she could move in. Now we're standing here with all her things, and you're acting like we're strangers." "I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I never said she could move in here. I said, if it helps Erin, I don't see why not." That was at the old place, which, if you recall, I don't live in anymore. Erin stepped forward, then her arms crossed. Her cheeks were red, but not from embarrassment, from fury. "This is petty, Rachel. You always act like you're so above everyone. But this is just cruel." I tilted my head. "You packed up your life and drove across the city to move into someone's apartment that you didn't even confirm still existed. That's not cruelty. That's entitlement." Erin's voice cracked. "You're my sister." "Yes," I said. "Cool, and you've spent years confusing that with free housing." Dad stepped between us, his voice edged with warning. "Enough, Rachel, we're not leaving. We've put up with a lot from you. You owe this to your sister." There it was. The word that always hung unspoken, oh, as if every dollar I'd paid, every hour I'd worked, every sleepless night spent solving problems I didn't cause, had been written down somewhere, part of a silent contract I never signed. I stepped back, picked up my phone. "What are you doing?" Mom asked, eyes narrowing. I didn't answer. I dialed 3 rings. Then 911. "And what's your emergency?" My voice stayed calm. "Yes, I have family members outside my apartment who are refusing to leave. They're not on the lease. They weren't invited. I'd like to report. Trespassing." Erin's mouth fell open. Frank swore under his breath. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. "Rachel," she whispered, almost pleading, "you're calling the police on your own family." "I asked you to leave," I said. "You didn't. The dispatcher asked for my address. I gave it." Erin's voice shook with rage. "This is going to ruin everything. Do you know what people will think of you? Do you know what they'll say?" "Yes," I said. "They'll say." I finally stopped opening my door. Mom blinked. Her voice dropped to something smaller. "You used to be kind." I didn't flinch. "You used to notice when I was hurting." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, packed with every ignored boundary, every swallowed word, every moment I'd said yes when I wanted to scream no. A patrol car pulled up 10 minutes later. The officer stepped out tall and calm, her hand near her belt but relaxed. "Evening," she said. "We received a call about trespassing." I nodded. "That's me." She looked at my parents, at Erin, at the car with bags still in the trunk. "Ma'am, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." "This is our daughter," Frank said. "This is a family matter, and this is her residence," the officer replied, "which you're not allowed to occupy without permission." Erin looked like she might cry. "Or throw something, or both. You're going to regret this." "Rachel." "No," I said. "I've regretted almost everything up until this point. This is the first thing I'm sure of." The next day, I woke up to 12 missed calls, 5 from Mom, 2 from Dad, the rest from numbers I didn't recognize, cousins probably, or family friends I hadn't spoken to since graduation. Then came the texts. "Why would you do this to your own sister?" "Your mom is devastated. Erin's sleeping in her car." "Is that what you wanted?" I didn't reply. I just scrolled. Eventually I found it, a Facebook post from my mother. Public 3 paragraphs punctuated by heartbreak emojis and a photo of Erin as a toddler. "We raised both our daughters to care for each other, but one of them has forgotten what that means. We're heartbroken that Rachel, so successful, so fortunate, would turn her back in our time of need. Erin didn't deserve this. None of us did." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments from people I hadn't seen since I was 12. Calling me selfish, cold, entitled. It wasn't new. Just louder. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, for the first time in my life, I posted back a thread. Simple, no flair, no hashtags. Screenshot the $2,000 transfer I made to cover the mortgage. Screenshot my name on Erin's car loan, followed by the collections. Notice a photo of the lawyer invoice from her DUI case. A timeline of every one-time favor I'd agreed to since I was 21. The receipt showing the sale of the condo, and finally a message I'd saved. One Erin had sent me 2 years ago, calling me a boring robot because I wouldn't let her crash for a month. I ended with one line, "I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped volunteering for emotional debt." I turned off my phone after that. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need applause. I just needed quiet, and for once, I had it. That night, the apartment was still. No noise from the hallway, no buzzing phone, just the quiet hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of old pipes shifting in the walls. I made tea, chamomile. It wasn't for sleep. I didn't need help sleeping anymore. It was for the ritual. A soft cup held in both hands, steam rising like forgiveness I hadn't asked for. My phone lit up once. Mom, then again. Erin, I didn't open the messages. I didn't have to. I knew the rhythm by now. Shock, anger, guilt, pleading. Always in that order. I blocked both numbers, not out of cruelty, not out of pride, but because not every door deserves to be knocked on forever. I walked out onto the balcony. It was cold, but not sharp. the kind of cold that reminded you you're alive. Below the city hummed along, people moving headlights, glowing someone walking a dog in a puffy coat, too big for spring. A neighbor 2 floors down waved when she saw me. I waved back. It was simple, that small gesture, but it was more real than most of the things I'd done out of obligation. Inside, I turned off the lights one by one, the living room, the kitchen, the hallway. No picture frames on the walls, no family photos, just quiet, just clean space. I didn't feel triumphant or bitter or broken, I just felt done. Done. Performing done, explaining done. Being the spare oxygen mask for people who never learned how to breathe on their own. Somewhere out there, they were probably rewriting the story again, casting me as the villain or the cold one or the ungrateful daughter. Let them. I didn't come here to be loved. I came here to stop pretending I didn't vanish. They just told the story like I had, and now I've written it back. I was 17 when I realized my name didn't belong in the house I grew up in. It was Kyle's birthday. There were balloons tied to the back of every chair, frosting smudged across the fridge, and the smell of store-bought lasagna heating in the oven. I was doing dishes because no one asked me to sit. My mom was laughing at something Kyle said about his football coach. My dad was filming on his camcorder, the old one with the broken flip screen. I dried my hands, took a notepad from the junk drawer, and sat alone at the end of the kitchen table. I wrote, "Don't forget how this feels. Don't forget cleaning up while they celebrate him. Don't forget the way they never say your name out loud when people are watching." Then I folded the note and tucked it behind the photo of our family from 2003. The one where I'd been cropped out after the print. I didn't read that note again for 19 years, but I remembered every word. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was mine. I'd worked for 10 years as a trauma nurse. Double shifts, night shifts, holidays, no vacations. I didn't have a husband, didn't have kids. I barely had time to keep my houseplants alive. But I had one goal, save my parents' home, and I did. Final payment cleared, deed clean, no liens, no debt. It was supposed to be over. My mom helped me hang the banner. "Congratulations, Elena," in gold letters across the fireplace. I catered the food, paid for the wine. Set every place setting by hand. My dad said he was running to the store for a drill he'd been eyeing. Kyle arrived late with Lacey on his arm and a Rolex on his wrist. "Wow," he said, surveying the room. "You really went all out. You always were, the organized one. Organized, not loved, not thanked, just useful." I was about to give a short speech. Something about home, about perseverance when my dad finally showed up. No drill in hand, just a bottle of champagne and that smile he used to save for Kyle's wins. He tapped a spoon to his glass. "I have a little announcement," he said. I smiled, waiting for it. Waiting for my moment. "To Elena," he said, "for organizing this beautiful party, always our dependable one." People clapped politely. I nodded, but the real celebration is for Kyle. The room stilled. Our boy's going viral. 10,000 followers on TikTok, and we've decided to invest in his future. We've remortgaged the house to help him launch his travel content brand. My fingers curled around the champagne glass. "Isn't it exciting?" my mom whispered. "He's going to Bali." "The camera just loves him." I didn't answer because I was already calculating how many hours of blood sleep and missed birthdays it had taken me to give them a house and how fast they'd handed it back to someone else. I didn't make a scene. I walked to the back hallway, took out my phone, dialed a number I had saved but hoped I'd never use Trevor Maynard's office, the voice said. "This is Elena Moore," I said. "Please tell Trevor it's time." "Of course. Would you like him to proceed?" I glanced through the archway at Kyle describing the Maldives like he'd earned the airfare at my mother, beaming at my father toasting the son I'd already paid for twice. "Yes," I said. "It's time to proceed." But this wasn't the first time my family erased someone. I just didn't know it yet. I didn't go back into the party. I waited in the upstairs bathroom sitting on the edge of the tub counting the tiles on the floor, like I used to when I was 15 and hiding from one of Dad's talks about why Kyle needed more room to grow. Laughter echoed through the vents. Kyle was probably showing off his promo reel, borrowed drone footage set to royalty-free music. They would eat the good shrimp. They would toast to his courage to chase dreams someone else paid for. Trevor called back 30 minutes later. "It's all still intact," he said. "The trust holds. Every mortgage payment you made went through it and the new loan, legally invalid. They can't remortgage something they no longer own. I exhaled. Not relief. Something colder. Something like confirmation. They'll fight it, I said. They can try. But unless you signed off and I know you didn't, it's just paper with someone else's signature pretending to be yours. I know, I said. He's done it before. That part slipped out. Trevor paused. You mean your father? When I was 19, I applied for a student loan, got denied, said I already had a loan open under my name, but I didn't. Trevor, I didn't. Another pause. We can look into that later, he said quietly. For now, I can have the letters drafted and delivered Monday morning. Do it! When I came back downstairs, Kyle was mid-story about how Bali sunsets performed better on reels than drone shots of Iceland. He didn't see me. None of them did. That was the thing. I could walk through my own life and not leave footprints. I stood near the kitchen watching my mother place another shrimp skewer on Kyle's plate. You need to eat more, sweetheart. You're burning so many calories traveling. She never said that to me when I was running 3 shifts back-to-back at Grady Memorial. Just told me my face looked tired. Dad caught sight of me. Then, everything okay? I smiled. Perfect. I left quietly. At home, I didn't turn on the lights, just sat on the couch with the papers from the trust. My name on every line notarized, time-stamped, archived. I'd created the structure after Dad almost lost the house the first time. Back then, I stepped in thinking, if I just do this right, they'll finally see me. Not as the backup daughter, not as the safety net. Just me. The next morning, Kyle called. Why are there legal blocks on the house title? I have sponsors waiting. This is sabotage. You'll figure it out, I said. You always do, right? This isn't fair. Mom and Dad said the house was ours. It was paid off by me. A beat. You always were jealous, he said. No, I replied. I just stopped pretending that your dreams matter more than my life. He hung up. By evening, Mom called. Her voice was softer, almost maternal. Elena, we didn't know you'd feel this way. We thought we could borrow against the house just for a little while. You're doing well? Kyle just needs a little help to get started. You remortgaged my life, Mom. That's not fair. You're right, I said. It's not. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at the folder in my lap at the signatures they gave me years ago without reading, and I realized something. They never thought I'd use them. They thought I'd always stay the reliable one. Quiet, exhausted, loyal. But even loyalty has a ledger, and mine was full. 3 days passed. I ignored every call. Trevor had the documents ready. I reviewed them between patients on my night shifts. Initials, timestamps, certified letters addressed to both my parents and to the mortgage broker. Everything airtight. On Thursday, I got a message from a name I hadn't seen in years. Madeline Weller, my cousin, Aunt Cora's daughter. We were close once before the family fractured along invisible fault lines no one ever admitted existed. Her message was simple. Saw the fallout on Kyle's Instagram. Elena, you okay? I didn't answer at first, but later that night I typed, I'm fine. They took the house. I took it back. 3 blinking dots. Then, that sounds familiar. Can I call you? We talked for 2 hours about Kyle, about Richard, about how my mother once told a neighbor I was just between things when I'd already been working 60-hour weeks for a decade. And then Madeline said, You know, this isn't new, right? I thought she meant the favoritism. She didn't. She meant Rachel, Aunt Rachel. I asked, trying to recall a face. All I remembered was a name, the older sister of my mother who had gone out west and was never quite right. She was the first one they erased, Madeline said. Back in the 90s, she ran Grandpa's business after he died, and when she refused to sign over control to Uncle Paul and your mom, they accused her of forging documents, said she manipulated the will. Did she know? Madeline said she liquidated everything, gave them nothing, then disappeared. I went quiet. She sent me birthday cards for years, Madeline added, but Mom told me not to reply. Said she was bitter, said she'd poisoned the family on purpose. That night, I found Rachel's name in a public records database. Rachel Lynn Whitaker, former business owner. No criminal record, currently residing in Arizona. I hesitated. Then I sent a message. She replied 5 hours later. I was wondering when one of you would call. We set up a video chat. She looked exactly like my mother, only older and sharper, the way a blade looks after you've stopped pretending it's ornamental. Her hair was silver. Her smile was small but real. I heard about the house. She said I heard about you. I replied. Rachel leaned forward. Let me guess, you gave everything. They took it. Now you're the villain? I didn't respond. She nodded. They don't hate disobedience. Elena, they hate memory. You're not just inconvenient. You're the evidence. We talked for an hour. She told me about her father's will, the business, how she'd spent years fixing what the men had broken only to be told she was ungrateful. They wanted a face for their legacy, she said. Not hands that built it. At the end of the call, she said, You'll win, but they'll say you destroyed them. I don't want to destroy anyone. That's what I said too. The next morning, Trevor called. His tone was clipped. I've been reviewing the mortgage application, Elena. Your father forged your signature silence stretched between us. He used a digital scan. It's clear, and that combined with the trust makes the new mortgage legally invalid and possibly fraudulent. What happens now? If the bank pursues it, they'll treat it as mortgage fraud. That's federal. I rubbed my temples. They won't come after you, he added, but they might come after him. I opened my drawer inside the folder. Trust documents, deed transfer records, payment ledgers, my name on everyone. For years, I kept receipts because I didn't trust their memory. Now, those receipts were the only truth left, and the woman they thought they'd erased. She remembered everything. I arrived at the house just before sunset. Same blue siding, same cracked walkway. The grass hadn't been cut. A plastic flamingo from Kyle's 5th birthday still leaned sideways near the porch, sun-faded and forgotten. I used the old key. It still fit. They were all waiting inside. My father stood near the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. My mother sat on the edge of the couch, hands clenched in her lap. Kyle was sprawled on the armrest. Lacey curled beside him like this was some kind of intervention, not a reckoning. You didn't have to come like this, my mother began. I came with documents. I said I set the folder on the coffee table. It made a solid sound, the kind that told you it wasn't bluff. These are the trust papers you both signed, I said. Every payment record, every repair, every tax receipt. The house was never yours to mortgage. My father didn't move. You tricked us, he said finally. No, I said evenly. I protected myself. You didn't ask what the papers said. You just signed. That's because we trusted you, my mother said. No, I said again. You depended on me. That's not the same thing, Kyle scoffed. So what now? You're kicking your own parents out on the street? No, I said. I'm giving you 30 days. That's more than you gave me when you signed my name to a loan. That landed. My father's eyes narrowed. You're overreacting. I reached into the folder again and pulled out the legal notice from the bank. Stamped, certified, undeniable. I'm not overreacting, I said. I'm just finished. Then Kyle stood. Actually, he said, digging into his backpack, you're not the only one with receipts. He tossed another folder onto the table. I found these in the attic last week. Mortgage papers, student loan records, credit lines I never opened. All with Dad's handwriting. My father's face went pale. You little don't, Kyle snapped. I let you wreck enough. No one spoke for a long time. Just the hum of the fridge and the tick of the wall clock Dad never fixed. Then a knock at the door. Rachel. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. She looked at me first. One sharp nod, then at Joanne. It's been a long time, she said. My mother's voice was thin. You shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have had to come, Rachel replied. She sat beside me. I took out the final envelope, the release forms, one for each of them, a clean exit. No contest, no headlines, just silence and surrender. If you sign these, I said, you walk away. No one files charges. The house gets sold quietly. You keep your names, and if we don't, my father asked. Rachel spoke before I could. Then your daughter sends everything to the bank, the notary, the IRS. She presses charges, and you lose a lot more than the house. Joanne picked up the pen first. Her hand trembled. I never wanted it to be like this, she whispered. It was like this the moment you looked at my sacrifice and saw a loophole. I said, Kyle signed next, then Lacey without a word. My father was last. He looked at the paper, then at me. You think you've won? No, I said. I think I've stopped losing. He signed. I gathered the forms, slipped them back into my folder. Stood. You have 30 days. After that, I changed the locks. As I reached the door, my mother stood. You're just like her, she said. I turned back. Rachel, she continued, voice bitter. Vindictive alone. Rachel didn't flinch, and neither did I. I'd rather be alone and honest, I said, than surrounded and erased. Outside, the air smelled like summer heat and lawn fertilizer. The sky was streaked orange. For the first time in years, the house behind me didn't feel like something I had to protect. It felt like something I'd finally outgrown. And inside, for the first time, they were the ones looking small. The silence came first. No more calls. No more texts. Just a stillness that settled over everything like dust in a room no one dared enter. I thought it would feel like peace. It didn't. It felt like fallout. 3 days after they signed the documents, a courier arrived at my door with a small cardboard box. No note, no return address, just a package with my name in my mother's handwriting. Inside was an old photo album, brown leather worn at the edges, the kind she used to keep under the coffee table full of Kyle's soccer games and birthdays. But this one was different. It wasn't for show. The first photo was of me, not smiling, not posed, just me painting the back fence when I was 22. A loose ponytail, sunburnt arms, no one else in the frame. The next me, installing storm windows, me, fixing the dishwasher, me, carrying groceries, me in scrubs asleep on the couch with my badge still clipped to my chest. Years of my life caught quietly on film. She'd seen all of it and never said a word. I closed the album, not angry, not grateful, just tired. I called Trevor that afternoon, listed the house. I said, let's get it done. He didn't ask questions, neither did the realtor. The listing went live the following week. I chose a modest asking price, enough to close the mortgage, quietly cover the transfer fees, and be done. Kyle had vanished by then. Lacey posted a cryptic message online. Sometimes people show you who they are. Believe them. Then she blocked everyone. Madeline texted me. Kyle used Mom and Dad's emergency credit card to buy one-way tickets to Bali. Now they're frozen. He's off-grid. I didn't reply. The night before the realtor's walkthrough, I went back to the house one last time. No furniture, no voices. Just empty rooms and the faint outline of where the rug used to sit in the living room. I walked through it all, kitchen hallway, back deck. Then upstairs to my old bedroom. The air still smelled like the lavender sachets I used to hang in the closet. The wall had a faint square where my bookshelf had been. I ran my hand across the molding, then opened the top drawer of the nightstand. Still there. The original note, folded, yellowing quiet. Don't forget how this feels. I didn't, but I finally folded it one more time, slid it into my coat pocket, and walked out. No drama, no confrontation, no apology. Just me, the last one to leave and the only one who cleaned up. We ate dinner at the same table they used to sit me beside, but never quite at. This time it was mine. The house was nearly empty. No photos on the walls, no voices echoing up the stairs. Just the long pine table I'd refinished myself when I was 23 and couldn't afford a new one. The chairs still creaked, the same. Rachel sat across from me, her hair pulled back, her posture perfectly straight. Next to her, Madeline poured wine into 3 mismatched glasses we'd pulled from the half-packed kitchen. You sure about this? Madeline asked. About selling? I nodded. This house has taken enough from me. Let someone else decide what it means next. Rachel tilted her head slightly, not judging, just observing, like she always did. We ate pasta, I made from scratch, no speeches, no music. Just quiet forks and the smell of garlic and something close to closure. After we cleared the plates, I reached into my coat pocket and unfolded the paper I'd carried all week, my own handwriting smudged in the corner. Don't forget how this feels. Rachel leaned in. You wrote that when I was 17 on Kyle's birthday. They'd forgotten mine the week before. Madeline looked down. I used to write letters to myself too. I never had the guts to read them. I didn't either, I said. Until now, I folded it again, laid it on the table like a final place setting. I didn't want revenge, I said quietly. I wanted to be seen. Rachel touched the edge of the note. They never see us when we're carrying everything, only when we finally drop it. The doorbell rang. The realtor right on time. She walked us through the final paperwork, inspection dates, closing timeline, key returns. When we stepped onto the porch, the late spring air felt too clean to belong to this house. Across the lawn, a for sale sign had already been hammered in. I looked at it for a long time. Not with sadness, not with pride, just stillness. I thought it would feel bigger, I said. It never does, Rachel replied, just honest. We stood there, 3 women who'd all been edited out of someone else's story. Inside the house waited for its next chapter. Rachel reached into her coat pocket and handed me a postcard sunset in Arizona. From when I left, she said, I didn't send it, didn't think anyone would keep it. I turned it over. Blank. Write something. Now, she said, even if it's just for you. I nodded. Behind me, the kitchen light blinked once, then stilled. I stepped off the porch onto the walkway I'd once shoveled every winter while Kyle slept in. I didn't look back because the house had already told me everything I needed to know. And because I finally had the only thing it never gave me before, a clean way out. When I was 16, my parents gave my room to my pregnant twin sister. They said it was time I learned to grow up, so I slept in a tent, outside, behind the kitchen window where they served cake and giggled over crib colors. That winter was long, but it started much earlier than December. My parents always told the story of how they prayed for a child. One child, a girl, if the Lord allowed it. Brianna arrived first, pink-faced, perfect lungs, strong enough to make the nurse laugh. I came 4 minutes later, quieter, smaller, unplanned. They didn't tell that part. They just called me the bonus, the unexpected, the extra. When people saw us together, they'd say things like, twins. Oh, but they're so different. And my mother would smile and reply, yes, Brianna takes after me. That was her way of saying, this one belongs. That one, not so much. It wasn't just the words. It was in the way they dressed her in new clothes from the department store while I wore hand-me-downs from church rummage sales, in the way her name was always embroidered on things, pillowcases, backpacks, even Christmas stockings, and mine was Sharpied on the tag. Brianna had tea parties and dance recitals. I had chores. They said I was more practical, like that was praise. But when you're 7, no one wants to be practical. You just want to be seen. I remember one Thanksgiving, she got a seat at the big table with the adults I was told to help Aunt Marla in the kitchen. That was the year I burned the sweet potatoes and got scolded, while Brianna was complimented on how nicely she folded her napkin. My father once said to me while fixing the gutter, "You're the kind of girl who'll get by just fine. You don't need all that praise stuff," but the way he said it made it sound like a consolation prize. The only person who ever spoke to me like I mattered was Grandpa James. He taught me how to bait a hook, how to change a tire, how to hold still when the world gets too loud. He'd say, "You've got more spine than the whole family combined, Claire, but you keep it quiet. That's power." I didn't always believe him, but I clung to his words like rope. He died when I was 14. After that, nobody called me Steel Girl anymore, not even in jest. A year later, they sent out a holiday card. Brianna stood between our parents holding a sonogram. Matching sweaters, matching smiles. I wasn't in the photo. But if you looked closely, bottom right behind the porch column, you'd see it, a blur of denim and a bent elbow, just enough to say, "We didn't forget you. We just framed you out." I was 16 when they told me. Mom, Linda. Though I stopped calling her that out loud sometime around 12, stood in the hallway with a mug of decaf and that pinched smile she wore when she was about to say something she already knew you wouldn't like. She'd started using it on me more in those years, like she'd grown allergic to my presence, but didn't want to be impolite about it. "Claire," she said, "we've got news." Behind her, my father, Tom, leaned against the stair banister, arms folded like he was waiting for a sermon to end. He didn't speak, not yet. That was Linda's job. He just hovered the punctuation mark at the end of her sentences. "Brianna's expecting." I already knew the test in the bathroom trash. The secretive whispers on the landline, the way she touched her belly after dinner like she was waiting for music to start. It had all been there. I just hadn't said it aloud. Unlike them, I still believed some things deserved silence. That's a lot, I said carefully. Linda waved the air like she was dismissing a mosquito. It's a blessing, Claire. She's 17, sure, but she's ready. They're getting married. Tom's calling the pastor this week. Tom nodded once as if to confirm that yes, the church basement was already booked, and no, my opinion wasn't required. Then came the part that mattered. With the baby coming, we'll need space. Your room is the only one close to the bathroom. It makes sense. I stared at her. What do you mean? You'll need to pack up, she said. We'll move your things into the garage for now. The garage, I said, like I hadn't heard her. There's no insulation. It smells like fertilizer. She tilted her head like I was being unreasonable. You're old enough to manage. We've let you stay longer than most parents would. You know, let me stay. As if my existence was a favor they'd extended past its due date. Brianna walked past at that moment, glowing like a lighthouse in one of Dad's old flannel shirts. She paused in the hallway, eyes wide and performative. You're not mad, are you? I mean, the baby's going to need a lot. She looked at me like I was supposed to say, of course not, and maybe cry or smile or hug her. Instead, I turned, walked up the stairs, and started packing. That night, I moved into the backyard. Not the garage, they'd filled it with boxes for the baby shower, so I found the old tent from summer camp patched to tear with duct tape and set it up under the elm tree. The nights in Georgia are quiet in winter, but not silent. The wind has opinions. The house still laughed. Through the frost-bitten flap of nylon, I could see their kitchen lights. They passed casseroles back and forth like love letters, set up balloons, hung baby socks from string. No one looked outside. They gave me a tent so she could have a crib. What were they planning to give me if I stayed? The tent lasted 19 nights. By the end of week 3, my fingers cracked even when wrapped in gloves, and my homework pages curled from condensation. I still went to school, still brushed my teeth at the gym locker room, still told anyone who asked that I was just camping out for a bit until our cousins left town. No one asked twice. During the day, I walked. I couldn't stay in the yard, not with Linda constantly peeking out to make sure I didn't track mud near the patio. So I wandered the sidewalks, circling the square, stopping at the library when it opened. That's how I passed the bakery. It wasn't fancy. The window paint was chipped and the neon, open, flickered like it had a stutter, but the smell. Warm sugar-burnt cinnamon rising dough hit me in the chest like a memory from a better life. I stood outside longer than I meant to, watching the man behind the counter mop the floor with slow, even strokes. He noticed, opened the door with one hand still gripping the mop. You just window shopping? He asked. Or you lost? I hesitated, then said, neither. I was just walking. He looked me over, not in a cruel way, just observant. I must have looked terrible. Oversized, hoodie split lip, the kind of face that flinches before anyone raises their voice. You hungry? I nodded. He motioned me in, wiped his hands on his apron. Frank Delaney, owner, janitor, baker, hostage negotiator. You can sweep. I nodded again, then grabbed that broom. There was no speech about helping the less fortunate. No questions about why I looked like I hadn't slept in a bed in weeks. Just a broom, a cloth, and a simple instruction mop, front to back, never side to side. I worked every afternoon that week. Quietly, Frank didn't talk much, but when he did, it was plain useful. How to check yeast by smell. How to watch a customer's face to see if they liked what they were chewing. By Friday, he handed me a key. I got a cot upstairs. It's next to the sugar sacks and the window doesn't open. But it's warm and the roof doesn't leak. If you want it, I took it. The bed frame creaked. The mattress was thin, but it was the first night I didn't hear Brianna laughing through the kitchen wall. The first night I wasn't cold. And the first night in a long time I didn't feel like I was trespassing inside my own life. I stayed above the bakery for nearly 4 years. At first, it was just a cot and a shelf where I kept my books and my backpack. But Frank never asked me to leave, and I never gave him a reason to. I worked every morning before school and every evening after I learned how to braid dough, when to pull a pie before the crust lied to you, how to stretch your hands without breaking the gluten. Frank never wasted words, but when I messed up, he'd grunt and show me again. That was his way of saying, "You're not hopeless." I finished high school early, not because anyone pushed me, but because I wanted out of everything that came before. No prom, no senior trip, no pictures in the yearbook. Just a signature from the principal and a bus ride back to the bakery where Frank handed me a warm roll and said, "You're gonna need a suit for job interviews." He didn't offer to buy it. He just said it like fact, like weather. I enrolled in night classes at the community college, accounting first, then small business law, then supply chain. I worked mornings at the bakery, evenings at a diner, and weekends doing books for a friend of Frank's who owned a hardware store. I didn't have time for anything else. I didn't want anything else. By the time I turned 25, I had 3 certificates, 1 business license, and no debt. Frank offered to retire and sign over the bakery, but I said no. He earned that place. Instead, I saved every dollar. No vacations, no takeout, no nonsense. I lived like I was still in that tent behind the house because part of me believed if I stopped, they'd find me again, that someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, "This isn't yours, you're just borrowing it." But I kept saving. At 29, I bought the house. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, nothing fancy. The porch leaned left, the floor creaked, the kitchen hadn't seen a working stove since the Bush administration, but it had walls and a deed and my name on it. Not, Frank's not. Tom's not, Linda's mine. I moved in alone with a mattress on the floor and 2 folding chairs from the bakery's back room. I ate dinner off a cardboard box and hung one thing on the wall, a photo of me and Grandpa James taken the summer before he died. He was squinting at the sun. I was holding a fishing rod too big for my hands, he'd told me once. "One day you'll build something nobody can take from you." So I did, and I didn't tell anyone. It came on a Tuesday. I was sanding the windowsill in the front room when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Frank never dropped by unannounced, and the mailman left things in the box. Most people texted first or didn't come at all. The doorbell rang again. Longer this time, impatient. I wiped my hands on my jeans, walked down the hall, and opened the door. There they were. Linda, Tom, Brianna, her husband, 3 kids, matching shirts. Linda was holding a Tupperware, the kind she used to deliver to church potlucks when I was 10. "Claire," she said brightly, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "We heard you bought a house. We're so proud of you." Tom gave a stiff nod, then looked past me into the hallway like he was checking the condition of a rental. Brianna smiled wide and stepped forward, her baby on one hip, the other 2 clinging to her skirt. "This place looks so good. You've really done well for yourself." I didn't move from the doorway. Linda lifted the Tupperware. "We brought banana pudding. Thought we could catch up." "Catch up," I repeated. She laughed like I'd made a joke. "It's been too long, sweetheart. We've all missed you." I said nothing. The hallway behind me was still half painted. I could hear the fan running upstairs. A grocery bag sat on the counter with eggs and milk I hadn't yet put away. Tom cleared his throat. "Brianna's family's getting bigger. They're a bit tight on space right now. We were thinking." "We thought," Linda interrupted, smoothing her blouse, "that maybe it's time to let the past go. Start fresh. You've got all this room now, and well, family should be together," Brianna chimed in. "I mean, we could all help each other. Wouldn't that be nice?" I looked at their faces, smiling, expectant. And then I looked at the shoes on their feet. New clean, the shoes of people who hadn't walked through snow to get to school, who hadn't mopped bakery floors before sunrise or slept on sugar sacks while pretending it was a mattress. "I lived in a tent," I said quietly, "in your backyard." The smiles faltered just a little. "You knew," I said to Tom. "You saw me through the kitchen window." He didn't answer. "And now you want to live here?" "Like none of it happened." Linda's voice sharpened. "Claire, don't be dramatic. That was years ago." "You're right," I said. "It was." I stepped back and opened the door wider, not to let them in, to let them see. The bare walls, the scuffed floor, the quiet space I'd built without them. "You should go, Claire," Linda began. "We're trying to do what I said. Rewrite it." Brianna shifted the baby on her hip. "You don't have to be bitter." I almost laughed, but instead, I shut the door, not slammed, not with anger, just closed, firm. A banana pudding sat on my porch for 3 days. I left it there. Let the sun have it. 2 weeks after they showed up at my door, a letter arrived from a local attorney's office. I stood on my porch in the morning light, coffee cooling in my hand, reading and rereading the first line. This letter serves as formal notice of a legal petition filed by the Matheson family requesting shared claim to the residential property located at 144 Oak Lane. I sat down on the steps, let the paper curl in the breeze. The legal language was cold, efficient. They weren't asking to be part of my life. They were asking for a piece of what I'd built on paper. They were suing me for my house. The next morning, I called Adele Watkins. Frank had given me her name years ago, told me, if anything ever gets ugly, she's the one you want. She was older, sharp-eyed, and didn't waste time. I met her in a small office above a notary shop that smelled like lemon cleaner and paper dust. She read the letter once, then again, slower. "They're claiming this was purchased with family money," she said. "It wasn't." "You sure?" I nodded. I worked for every dollar. No gifts, no loans, nothing in writing or in spirit. Adele looked at me for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out a legal pad, and started asking questions. Birth dates, prior addresses, any known inheritance or assets. When she asked about my grandfather, I told her everything I remembered. The fishing trips the old van he used to take us to the lake. The tin box he kept locked in his closet that I was never allowed to touch. Was there a will? "I don't know," I said. "He died when I was 14. They told me he left everything to my parents." Adele leaned back, fingers pressed together. "Let me look into it." She called me 4 days later and told me to come in. When I arrived, she had a thin folder on the table and a look I'd seen before on Frank's face the night he found me sleeping behind the flour sacks. There was a will, she said. It had been filed quietly under an outdated name, James F. Matheson Sr., with a restricted access code that Adele had requested through probate court. It listed one beneficiary, Claire Elizabeth Matheson. The date was 9 months before his death. He left you everything she said. A modest trust, real estate stock, his war pension. I stared at the folder, but I never saw a dime. No. Because your parents petitioned for temporary guardianship and assumed fiduciary control. You were a minor. They liquidated the assets and declared them absorbed into household debt. They spent it. She nodded. All of it. Most notably, 6 months after the liquidation, your sister's wedding was paid in full. Your parents purchased a new SUV and they refinanced their mortgage. I didn't say anything. Adele closed the folder. You have a case. Will it hold, with documentation? Yes, but it won't be pleasant. I don't need pleasant. She paused. You want to go after them? No, I said. I want what was mine. She nodded slowly, slid the folder toward me. They might not have thought you'd find out. I ran my hand across the cover. They thought I'd stay in the tent. The courtroom wasn't large. Just a few pew-like benches, scuffed floors, and a judge who looked like she'd heard every kind of family lie already. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Adele beside me, calm as stone. Across from us were Linda and Tom, dressed like it was Sunday service, and Brianna, who looked everywhere but at me. Her husband sat behind them, chewing on his nails. The judge called the hearing to order. The petition for shared property rights was read aloud in monotone legal cadence, on the grounds that the defendant's current residence was acquired using liquidated family assets belonging to the estate of James F. Matheson Sr. That was the first time they said Grandpa's name out loud in that room. Tom flinched. Adele stood. Her voice was measured crisp. Your Honor, we submit into evidence the last will and testament of James F. Matheson, Sr., dated 9 months prior to his death, naming Claire Elizabeth Matheson as sole beneficiary of all liquid and assigned assets. She handed the folder to the bailiff. Further documentation will show the estate was appropriated by the petitioners during the defendant's minority, with funds traced to the purchase of a vehicle home, renovations and event expenses for Brianna Ann, Matheson's wedding. Linda leaned forward. That money was for the family. Claire was part of the household. We didn't steal it. Adele didn't blink. Claire was a minor, she was not consulted, and she never received notification of her legal inheritance. The judge flipped through the folder. Her brow furrowed once slightly. Tom spoke for the first time. We were told it was joint, that we were the executors. You filed as temporary guardians, Adele said. But you never disclosed the will's existence to the beneficiary. That's fraud. Brianna finally looked at me then. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't speak. I had nothing left to say to people who once looked through me like frost on a window. The judge closed the folder and looked at Linda. Did you inform your daughter of her legal right to this trust when she turned 18? Linda didn't answer. The judge turned to me. Miss Matheson, do you wish to file a counterclaim? I nodded. Once I do. A pause. Then, this court finds in favor of the defendant. All property rights remain solely with Miss Matheson. Restitution proceedings will begin within 30 days. The gavel came down like a door closing. Not slammed, just final. As we stood, Linda reached for my arm. I stepped back. Claire, she whispered, we were just trying to do what's right for Brianna. I looked at her. You did. Then I walked out and didn't turn around. The house was quiet when I got back. I locked the door behind me and slipped off my shoes, like I always did, even though there was no one left to track in mud. The late afternoon light spilled across the floorboards, catching the edges of unfinished trim and the slight tilt in the hallway. Imperfections I'd memorized, chosen. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Like a storm had passed without knocking anything over, just shifting the air and making everything sharper. Restitution would take months. Adele would handle the filings. I'd get some of the money back, though, not all. But it wasn't about the money. It never had been. I opened the closet in the front hall and pulled out a small cardboard box labeled Grandpa. Keep inside was the only thing I'd saved from the old house. Besides my birth certificate, a photo of Grandpa James and me taken when I was 8. We were standing in front of his truck, both squinting into the sun. He had one hand on my shoulder and the other holding a tackle box. I took the photo and walked to the living room. Above the fireplace was a nail I'd never used. I hadn't wanted to hang anything until I knew the house was truly mine. Now I did. I placed the frame carefully, stepped back. Then I reached into the box again and pulled out something smaller. His old Navy dog tag, the one he used to wear like a keychain. I set it on the mantel beside the photo, then slid a small brass plate beneath it, something I'd had engraved weeks earlier before the hearing, before the paperwork. It read, "This house was built from silence, not from love, and that is enough." I didn't cry. There was nothing to mourn. They had taught me absence. They'd shown me how to vanish from photographs, how to go unnoticed at a table, how to live at the edges of a family without making a sound. And I had learned so well. I rebuilt a life from it. Later that night, I turned off my phone. I didn't need to read the messages. I knew what they'd say. Regret, guilt, twisted apologies wrapped in blame. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the wind move through the trees in the front yard. I wasn't waiting. No one was coming, but for the first time in years, I could finally hear myself breathing,